everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Oner Podcast, the podcast where we break down and review films all in one big, long, unbroken take. I'm Austin Archer, and with me, as always, is my childhood next-door neighbor and lifelong best friend,
Cramer Huckleberry.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. We have lost another Hollywood legend, and we
We
decided
have.
we lost Val Kilmer, and we
Yeah.
decided in honor of Val Kilmer's career and legacy, we would watch one of his most infamous roles in 1993's Tombstone, directed by George P. Cosmatos and written by Kevin Jarre.
Kevin Jarre, I think is how you pronounce
Kevin
it from the
Jarre.
things I've watched. Yeah.
Yeah, Kevin
Yeah.
Jarre.
And I guess even the director, George P. Cosmatos, or however you
Yeah,
say it, I don't even think he really directed the movie either. There's
really.
like there's like a ton of uh um Kurt Russell kind of claims like he directed the movie. And a lot of people back him up on that, like because they fired. So was it Kevin Jarre? What is it? What's his name?
Mhm.
Kevin Jarre was originally supposed to direct the movie. He got fired a few weeks in because he was inexperienced, and I think he had too big of a vision for the movie,
Mm.
and so it was just it wasn't working out. So they fired him, and then they had a time I think they kept shooting, and then they brought in George the other guy,
Yeah, the
and
other
yeah,
guy.
and I guess nobody really liked him. Like there's this interview with how do you say his name? Michael Bine.
I don't know. Yeah,
Okay,
I was thinking that before the show. I was like,
yeah.
Michael Bean?
Michael
Yeah.
Bine.
Um,
That guy. He was on a podcast. He's just talking about he hated the director George Cosmatos.
I like
George C.
Cosmatos because it sounds
Cosmatos. Yeah.
he sounds like a comic book character. I am Cosmatos.
Cosmatos.
Or
Yeah. George
Cosmatos.
Cosmatos. Sorry. He like
Yeah,
hated him, and there was a lot of kind of crazy stuff that happened
I think
behind the
I've
scenes.
heard this before, that this is one
Yeah.
of those movies that has a lot of lore behind it, sort of like with
Yes.
American History X, where
Yep.
Edward Norton sort of took the movie over from the director and did his own
Yeah.
cut, and that's what wound up in theaters. That this was, but I mean, like if you're gonna come in there and direct a movie like this with this kind of a cast, this cast is like, it's so jam packed
It's
to
crazy.
the
There's
gills.
so many people.
Yeah, yeah.
Like a little too much, honestly. Like
I
there's a
think
little too many people.
you could see how there would be a lot of egos on
Yeah.
this set. And when Kurt Russell's got to be number one on the call sheet, on a call
Yeah.
sheet like this, where
Yeah.
he feels that responsibility, like a lot of these guys, he might have gotten them involved, like called them on the phone personally and been
Yeah.
like, hey, come do this movie with me. And then he feels this pressure of being like, I'm the one who convinced Sam Elliott to be here. I'm the one who
Hmm.
convinced,
Hmm.
Powers Booth to be here. I'm the, like, I
Yeah.
got all these guys involved. I
Yeah.
got to and if the director's not up to the task, then the actors sort of, I
Yeah.
can totally see that happening on a project like this where,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. It is. It's big. It's almost too big. And again, from all the stuff that I read, like this was supposed to be a lot longer and a lot more detailed, and they ended up it just seemed like it was gonna go way over budget, so they had to cut a ton, and you can kind of tell from the
oh yeah,
movie. You
oh
can
yeah.
definitely tell.
There's a lot of storylines. There's a lot of story in here.
Yeah.
Honestly, I gotta be honest, Tombstone reminds me a lot of the films that I'm in, the Horizon movies, in that like it's
Okay.
really big in its scope.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
wants to tell a lot of different stories from a lot of different characters, and it wants to give time for character building to all the, but it just
Yes.
doesn't. And it's a 2-hour runtime, which honestly in the version that it's in feels long,
It does.
because it
It
just
does.
feels like, oh man, we've got a lot of stuff we're trying to get through. But it almost feels like if this movie had maybe been like a mini series, like a 5 or a 6-part mini series where each episode was 1 hour long, you could have done more with each of these
Yeah.
characters and done more about, like, what's the backstory of
Yeah.
Ringo, and what's the, how did
Yeah. Yeah.
how did the Cowboys come to be initially, get to know, do more on Doc and Wyatt's
Yeah.
friendship, and how,
Yeah.
and develop all of those things more, because the movie just has a lot of threads that it's trying to keep track of.
Yeah.
And It doesn't quite have the time. A lot of the
No.
criticism that the Horizon movies have gotten, well, the first one especially, is that it feels like, "Oh, we don't have enough time for all of these storylines." My big pushback on that
Yeah.
is, "Well, we've got 4 movies, so
Yeah, 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 yeah.
give us a
This is
second."
yeah,
Yeah,
that was supposed to be a lot of movies. This is supposed to just be one movie. It wasn't
right.
planning to be more. So it's trying to jam pack more than it really has room for.
Yeah, and
So
it might be another situation where, and we've talked about this before, where pacing doesn't necessarily mean, or good pacing doesn't necessarily mean shorter. This might be a situation where the movie might feel less or less big burdensome and overloaded
yeah,
if they actually gave these other storylines more time. Maybe a 3-hour cut of this movie would feel a little more uh,
it
like
might. Yeah, it might feel a
a
little more
little
complete.
smoother. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. Because there's just a lot that I am like, what? Like it was yeah, it was jarring in a lot of ways because you don't know. They set up a lot of stuff and characters will come and go, and it's like, well, wait, what happened to that guy? And then like he comes back and it's like, oh yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so it would have actually it I mean, it's probably a better structural movie if they go longer and if they do what they wanted to do, like the
Mhm.
3-hour epic or whatever. Um, but I will say, even with all the faults, this movie is so much fun.
Totally, oh my
There's
gosh.
so much fun about this movie. It's
And a big part of what makes it so fun is Val Kilmer. Val
absolutely.
Val Kilmer is an absolute, like, it is not overhyped, his work in this film.
No,
It
it's
it
not.
it's like, it almost feels like the relationship between him and Wyatt is, like, the one thing that made it through a
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
the, that
Oh, yeah.
so much fat needed to be trimmed in different areas, and it feels like the
Yeah.
one thing that got to stay. And I'm sure there's a ton that was cut still
Oh, yeah.
of the
Yeah.
2 of them, and but I feel like that's one of the threads that still remains, and
Yeah.
his work is so enjoyable. It's
Eh,
just so fun.
he it's I watched, like, Val Kilmer, it was Watch Mojo, and Val
Mhm.
Kilmer's top 10 performances that they just made because he passed away, and he is an actor that just, like there's something about him, right?
Mhm.
He's a very I don't even know how to explain it. Like he demands to be seen.
Yeah.
And like you just watch him and he just everything he does, even if it's pretty straight, he's got a presence, like I mean, you could argue that Batman was his, just most straightforward role. And the movie itself wasn't great, but like I mean, we were young when that came out, and I always loved him as Batman. I thought he was amazing. So,
You can
but
see that he's trying to do something in that movie that is
yeah,
he's just he's an actor who really wants to bring a gravitas to the role
yes,
of Bruce Wayne and Batman,
yeah.
but he's stuck in a obscenely silly film.
Yes,
And
yes.
Tommy Lee Jones is an actor with a lot of gravitas who knows what movie he's in, and maybe the
Yeah,
problem with Val Kilmer's performance in that movie is he
a little too
refuses
straight.
to accept which movie he's in.
Yeah, I
And,
could see that. Yeah.
and it's like, it was like the height of Jim Carrey's,
Yeah,
uh
yeah,
reign over Hollywood, and
yeah.
so Jim Carrey cast such a big shadow over the tone of that film, and
Oh,
Tommy
yeah,
Lee Jones sort of
yeah,
was happy to just drop right in and get
yeah.
into that world, but
Mhm.
I don't blame Val Kilmer for trying to do what
No.
he wanted to do with the part, but I also, like, I've seen documentaries about that where he didn't know what he was getting himself into, and
Yeah,
it was like
yeah.
he didn't realize till they were shooting the movie, like, "Oh, I didn't realize this is the kind of movie they wanted to make," and that's not what he wanted to do, and I
Right, right.
I think because that's the movie where I was first introduced to Val Kilmer,
Mhm.
is
Yeah,
Batman Forever,
yeah.
that I've sort of for my whole life had a skewed view of him as an
Interesting,
artist and
okay.
as an
Yeah,
actor. I've
yeah.
just sort of been like, "Oh, yeah, he's that guy from
From
that
Batman.
one Batman from Batman Forever who's fine," and he's in other things, like, I saw, like, The Saint growing up,
Yeah,
and that movie,
yeah,
and I remember that movie was probably too adult for me at the time that I saw it, and
yeah,
just
yeah,
didn't really land with me, and, you know, I don't think I realized what a true
yeah,
actor he is, what a true character actor he is, until only the last couple years when I watched that documentary that his son made about him,
yeah,
and it kinda went through his career. I was like, and I knew him from Willow. I loved Willow growing up.
yeah,
I loved him
yeah,
as Mad Mardigan, but I always just kind of thought of him as like a popcorn actor. And
Yeah.
it wasn't until I watched that documentary that I realized, like, Val always wanted to be considered a great actor, like a
Oh,
great
yeah.
chameleonic character actor who
Yeah.
disappears into roles. And I'm seeing that more and more as I revisit his filmography, that like the guy was really bringing dimension and character and different unique traits to every part that he played.
Yeah.
And here with Doc Holliday, you're like, wow, he's really disappearing into this
Oh, yeah.
character. And
Yeah,
yeah.
he adds so much fun to this movie. And
Mhm,
every movie that he's in, I like when he plays. I mean, he always brings something interesting to the character, but I like when he plays a character that is a little bit over the top. So obviously we'll talk more about him in Tombstone, but I love him in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
mhm.
Like when he's a pretty straight guy, but then when things go crazy, like it's have you seen Kiss Kiss Bang
I've
Bang?
never seen it.
Okay, you should
Yeah,
watch it
yeah.
because it's like there's one part where uh uh oh my gosh, why am I so bad with
Robert
names?
Downey Jr.?
Thank you. Robert
Yeah.
Downey Jr. Spoilers for Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. He puts one bullet in a gun and he's trying to get a guy to talk and he pushes it down. You know, he one bullet in a gun does like Russian roulette and he shoots and it
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 it it
actually
fires.
shoots the guy.
Yeah.
And he's like, You put a live round in there?" And he's like, "Yeah, there's like a six. I thought there was like a 6% chance." He's like, "6%? Who taught you math?"
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, and he
Yeah.
just like he like hates Robert Downey Jr. He's so funny when he can play these characters that have a lot to them, right? And
Yeah.
in this movie with Doc Holliday, the fact that he is so sure of himself,
Mhm.
he knows he's better than everybody else at what he does, and he flaunts it, right? Like all the time. Just made him so much fun to watch. But then adding the fact that he has tuberculosis in it, like you could see every time he was on screen, it looked like he was sick, like
Yeah, and that's
genuinely sick.
definitely that's, they are caking on the makeup on
Yeah, they
him.
are. Yeah.
They're definitely the makeup department is like, they never let him not be covered in sweat, and
Yeah.
he's pale as the moon every
Yeah.
time we see him.
Yeah.
But it's also in the way he carries himself, and I love that Doc Holliday in this movie is sort of just like a ghost. Like, he's just
Yeah.
like this, like, he's like the specter of death. Even the way that they costume him, that he's sort of draped with, like,
Yeah.
this coat that he never really fully puts on, and he just
Yeah.
sort of he, like, follows the other men around like the angel of death, and, like, he's,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and I love that he's going along on all these, adventures with them while
Yeah.
he seems like he's always, like, one false move away from passing out and dying. And but
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
but nonetheless, he's always smoking a cigarette and he's always drinking and he's
Yeah.
always, and
Yeah.
yeah, you know, we spoiler alert for Tombstone, we're gonna do a breakdown of this movie. I do think that, yeah, this movie's kind of messy and it's kind of all over the place. Weirdly though, I think that added to the fun of the movie
Yeah.
for me,
Yeah.
because because it felt in some ways formulaic, right? Like, it felt like they were building a
Yeah.
formulaic kind of like popcorn western, a shoot 'em up
Right.
movie, but then it would always take these twists in the plot that I wasn't expecting, that were, I think, part of the haphazard way it was put together and
Yeah.
part of the editing, but it was also, like, kind of refreshing to go, "Oh, I didn't think, Powers Booth was gonna die yet." Like, I thought
Yeah.
he was the main bad guy, and I thought the whole movie would sort of go
Yeah.
toward a final confrontation between, you know,
Yeah.
Power
Yeah.
but, like, the fact that this movie doesn't really follow a traditional narrative path in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, that it's more, unfurls kind of like real life,
Yeah.
where the events sort of happen as they happen. They don't happen in order of how they should happen in a
Yes.
movie, and I kind of liked that. I kind of liked the scattershot nature of the plot and storytelling. I thought it
Yeah.
added to the world a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're totally right because it feels very classic
Yeah.
in many many ways. It's very much like an old time classic
Mhm.
Hollywood movie, right? Like, and I think that seemed intentional. It also seemed, yeah, it didn't follow the more modern structural type, but that was okay because of exactly what you talked about, right? There's things that come up and it's like, oh, I thought it was going to go this way, but it went that way. You could take it either way. You can either like it or you don't like it, and it's personal preference. But it really there is a lot that is really really fun, and it keeps it very interesting. Now, again, having said that, the fact that there is no real like main antagonist is like, who are they going after? Like, what?
Right, right. It's just sort of like the
Who's the bad
gang
guy?
in
Like,
general, like, just sort
yeah,
of like the gang,
yeah,
and whoever happens to be in charge of the gang is the
yeah,
new main antagonist,
yeah.
but
And I
yeah.
think what you said too, like this is they tried to be, um, they tried to follow the actual story
Mhm.
of what happened, right? And I mean, it's it's relatively accurate from what I understand. I mean, obviously it's a movie, so it's never really accurate, but like I think that is kind of why there was no like main villain because they had the shootout of the OK Corral, and then they had the where he's in the river and he kills the guy.
Mhm.
So it kind of I think they were kind of trying to stick to what happened in real life. But
Which again, I and you can feel that it's
yeah,
like the reason why the events are happening in the order that they're happening is because
yes,
that's mostly how they happened in the real story, or at least in some tellings of it, and I
yeah,
kind of like that the film doesn't feel the need to sort of contort itself into a more traditional structure in
yes,
order to feel like the events are happening where they should in like a quote unquote
yeah,
good movie. However, I mean, that being said, I think that the messiness becomes a problem for the film when there's either things that are left in this edit, this 2-hour edit that feel like, "Oh, maybe that would make more sense in the longer edit, but in this
yeah,
version, you don't need it."
yeah,
And or when there's, like, strands that altogether feel like they get abandoned.
yeah,
And right from the jump, we sort of start with something that's like, "Huh, weird way to start this movie,"
yeah.
because we open the movie on now, I don't mind the montage. We do a little montage of, like, it's like a black and white
Oh
old-timey
yeah, yeah, yeah,
video
yeah.
that's like a
That's
prologue,
right. Yeah,
and it's like a prologue of, like,
yeah.
telling us about Wyatt Earp
Here's where
and
everybody is, and
yeah, and
yeah,
here's the town of Tombstone and Doc Holliday and I don't mind that. But
yeah,
then we open on this kind of like this kind of action scene of the cowboys showing up to a wedding, and
yeah.
they and we get this shot of Powers Booth walking in, and I like his boots with the aces on them, the
Oh yeah,
cards
yeah,
on
yeah.
them.
That's
Those are
right.
fun.
Yeah,
But then these people come out from a wedding, and Powers Booth looks at him and says, "Y'all killed a cowboy." And
yeah. The
then
two cowboys.
y'all killed 2 cowboys. And
Yeah,
then they have a shootout, and they kill most of the people at this wedding party.
yeah,
And then that's kinda just like it, but it's like it's sort of the movie just being like, "These are the bad guys," but that storyline is nothing. It's just sort of like
yeah,
a set piece to show us that these guys are bad, but it feels like that storyline probably had more to it,
yeah,
and this is the one leftover thread that made it into the edit, and they
yeah,
decided to use it as, like, an establishing scene to
yeah,
establish, but you can already tell, even in the way that scene is cut, that there's, like, already story going on between, Michael Biehn's character and
yeah,
Michael Rooker's character,
yeah,
and the interplay of how they all feel about each other and Powers Booth and all but it's like, we don't know who these people are yet, and it feels like their movie has already started
yeah,
before we started watching the film, and we're sort of coming in the middle of it, and the movie in its version that it's being presented to the audience is like, we're going to use this as an establishing scene, but I don't think that it probably initially existed as an establishing scene for this gang.
yeah.
And
I
so,
I
yeah,
I completely agree. I think
yeah,
it was probably something that they just used as, and that's kind of a lot of this movie. There's a lot of which I actually really like. Like I can tell, like, okay, this looks like it would have been more. There's something more that's going on. But it does at least give you like, okay, it gives you kind of their dynamics. Powers Booth is really leading things. Michael Michael Bine, Michael
yeah.
Bean, whatever. He's kind of next in line, and he doesn't, don't mess with him because
Mhm.
he's smart and he'll kill you if you make him mad. And then you do see Michael Rooker, who's kind of like, you can tell he's got this like moral dilemma going on. So it's good as a good introduction. And
I
then
did you in the first scene, I thought that Michael Bean or Bine
I
was
did too.
having it looked like he was having a moral
I
conflict
did
as
too.
well.
I
And
did
then
too. Yep.
it was because he even has a scene later on in, like maybe 30 minutes from the first scene where they're talking about making a deal with the devil because they just watched a play about
Yeah.
making a deal with the devil. And Powers Booth is saying, like, well, what would you do in that situation if you were making a deal with the devil? He's like, because I know what I'd do. He's saying all this stuff. And then Michael Bean's character says, well, I've already already done that. And it's
Yeah.
sort of like this way of saying, I sold my soul to be a member of this gang. I already made a deal with you.
Mhm.
And he's showing that he resents Powers Booth, which in my mind is like he resents the gang. He doesn't fully
Yeah.
approve of everything the gang does, but maybe he had to sell his decency, his dignity, his integrity for money. Like maybe the gang was
Yeah.
the only way
Yeah.
for him to take care of his family or something like that. But then he just winds up becoming the bad guy in like seemingly out of nowhere. Like all of a
Yeah.
sudden,
Yeah.
it's just like, oh, he's like maybe the main bad guy now. And I didn't for the first half of the film, it seemed like he would be one of the people who would maybe turn his back on the gang or something.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
you
totally.
know,
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, that turns out to be Michael Rooker, which is
And again,
funny.
maybe
But
there's more to that in a
yeah.
longer cut, or maybe that, and I'm sure like I've talked to actors who have been in movies like this where it's like Adrian Brody, who was the lead in the Thin Red Line,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
they shot the entire movie, that Terrence Malick movie, shot the entire movie. Adrian, it was his big break in his
Yeah.
career, and they did a press tour, and now like he was on the cover of like Variety with all these other like leading actors with big
Yeah.
movies coming out. The movie premieres, and he's in like 10 minutes of the movie, and and Terrence Malick just decided to completely cut him out of the
Yeah.
movie without telling him, without telling
Yeah.
his team, without. And Adrian Brody's like, it to this day, he's like, it's one of the biggest, like career disappointments of my life to
Yeah.
show up and I'm sure that there were people who are in this movie who are like, I shot so much more stuff. Like
Yeah.
there's just so much. I'm sure that there are like scenes between Michael Rooker and Michael Biehn where they're talking about like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
how do you feel about what's going on here? And but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it is. I did feel the same way, but it kind of works. It at least works. Like these guys are crazy. Don't cross them. It definitely feels like there's more, but it at least does set up how dangerous they are.
And
Right.
again, the messiness of it is something that for me kind of became part of the experience of watching the
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
Like I just sort of liked that there always seemed like there was more implied story going on that I
Yeah.
couldn't see. And I don't necessarily mind that. I'm not always going like, "Well, let me know more about that." I'm just like, "Oh, I
Mhm.
like that this person's performance has a depth to it that is probably informed by scenes that they shot that are not
Yeah.
actually making this final cut of the film,
Yeah.
but it means that every time they're on camera, they're really doing something that's informed by a more three-dimensional character that was written in a screenplay somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I like that, because it makes the world just feel full. It makes the
Yeah.
world feel, you know,
Yeah.
m
Like
like
there's more to it. Yeah.
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 Yeah, so then we get introduced to the Earp brothers,
Yes.
and we get a nice establishing shot of Kurt Russell. Can we talk for a second here, just as two bros, as two just heterosexual straight friends, about
Yes.
how hot Kurt Russell is in this movie? Has he ever been as
No.
sexy as he is? Like he is.
No.
Like when he first shows up in this movie, I'm like, oh my goodness, what a leading man! Like
It's
what a
like that right there. That's a man.
that is a movie star right there. Like
Yeah.
that is like
Yeah.
a guy at the height of his movie
Yeah.
stardom. What a jawline, what a mustache.
Oh, the
What
mustache is what
oh,
makes it, man. And I guess
oh,
all the mustaches are real, and his is the best.
oh my goodness. And like that is like when he first pulls up and you see like his pants with his boots, immediately I was like, oh, I love those pants. And then the camera like pans up and I was like, oh, everything that he's wearing is so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
He just looks him and his brothers look fantastic in this movie
Yeah.
everywhere they go. And I think that's
Yep.
part of like their kind of storyline is they're retired lawmen who
Yeah.
made decent money doing what they were doing, but now they've come to Tombstone to like they're not doing, gunslinging
Yeah.
or they're not, being lawmen anymore, but they just want to make money. They just want to like
Mhm.
run a casino and make
Yeah.
as much money as they can. But they already look like they've been doing pretty well for themselves. They got
Yeah.
clean, spick and span clothes, and they got
Yep.
wives with nice dresses on, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Drinking opium or whatever his
Yeah.
wife is drinking. We'll get to that in a second. The thing that they do well, though, again, like this movie has many, many really, really good character introductions. So we just did the
Oh
first
yeah.
one with the bad guys. And then we have this one with Kurt Russell, who gets like a bunch in a row,
Mhm.
even until like the midpoint. I'm like, why are you still introducing him? Like, we
Yeah.
know who he is. Like, why are you giving him these things that like you give to a
Yeah.
character that you introduce? But he starts out and he goes and he takes the horse. The guy's whipping his horse, right? And like,
Yeah.
and he like he grabs the reins from the guy, starts whipping the guy. He's like, hurts, don't it? Right? He's
Yeah.
like, go away, basically.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh wow, what a great like, don't mess with Wyatt Earp,
Yeah, he
right?
asks the guy, "You ever had a Hertz donut?" And the guy says, "What's that?" And then he hits him with the reins and he says, "Hertz donut."
Oh yeah,
No, I'm just kidding. He doesn't,
that would have been great, right?
yeah.
But yeah, that so it's a great
Yeah.
such a dumb joke.
I was like, "Come on, give me the"
That was great.
He
When
asks the
the-
guy, "Why does it smell like up dog in here?" And the guy says,
What's up,
"What's up,
dog?
dog?" And he goes, "Nothing, what's up with you?" And then he gets on his horse and
Yeah,
rides away.
yeah, right.
It's awesome.
Oh, it's great. It's great.
No, but yeah, they do this fun thing where they like look in the reflection of and like they
Yeah,
establish like the brothers and the
yeah,
wives all
and
together.
yeah, it's like so like yeah, that was
Yeah,
getting kind of like the old Hollywood like, hey, here's all of the actors,
yeah.
like. But this is the thing, the cinematography in this movie is so beautiful.
Oh yeah,
It is shot really, really well. Like
yeah.
all the dusk shots and even this shot, like it just looks really good. And they've got some dolly moves that just add a lot of interest. So
Look, if
it's
if you're gonna do a western, the one thing you got to do is make it pretty. Like
yeah, yep, yeah,
yeah.
and they do that. They do that really, really well. So it's a great introduction there. They go into town, and then we have another kind of introduction where they go into this bar or this
This scene's great.
casino.
This
Yeah.
scene's
Oh,
great.
this
Yeah.
scene is so again a great way to introduce Wyatt Earp. Like you have that good one with the horse. Now
Mhm.
you have really like what he goes in and he's talking to the bar keep and he's like, oh, it's like this is a great, this is a great place. Why aren't there more people? And he's like, well, that guy. And it's Billy Bob Thornton.
Dude, while you were watching this movie, did you just keep going, "Oh hey, oh hey"? Like every time a new actor would show
Yeah,
up, I was like, "Oh," like when Michael Biehn showed up, I was like, "Oh, it's the guy from Terminator and
yeah,
Aliens." And
yep,
then, then you see Steve Lang from Avatar. It's
yeah,
like, "Oh, that's Steve Lang from
yeah. I didn't even know
Avatar."
it was Steve Lang until after.
Yeah,
But then,
it,
yeah,
and then
and
Billy
then you've
Bob
got
Thornton shows up.
yeah,
Yeah.
and Thomas Hayden Church
Thomas Hayden Church,
and then the
dude.
other guy
Yeah.
from My Big Fat Greek Wedding. That
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
I forgot his name. But yeah, it was every time the first time I saw it, I knew it was Billy Bob Thornton.
Yeah.
But then like this time seeing it, I didn't really recognize all the other actors. So, but Billy Bob Thornton's a total jerk. So he's just getting nobody wants to go in there to play poker because he's such a and he actually Billy Bob Thornton does great. I guess they just told him like just be a jerk and figure out what you want to say. And he just like he just like ad-libbed all of his lines, I guess.
I love what Kurt Russell says. Kurt Russell says, "Why don't you smoke or skin that smoke cannon?" I'm like, "What a great line." He goes, "Why don't you skin that smoke cannon and find
Yeah.
out?"
Yeah.
And I'm
Well,
like, "Oh, what a great line."
he goes up to him and
Yeah.
he's like, I can't remember the exact exchange, but basically he's like, you need to get out. And he's like, oh, and he says that skin the smoke cannon. He slaps him, open hand slaps him
Yeah.
once, and he's just like Billy Bob Thornton doesn't know what to do. So he slaps him again. Does he slap him three
He
times? I
slaps
think
him 3 times.
he slaps him three times, and then Billy
Yeah.
Bob is like bleeding. And he's like, you gonna do something? You're just gonna stand there and bleed. Right.
Oh,
It's
it's
like,
so good.
oh, like
But
that's a movie line.
I think my favorite thing is coming up next, which like this is so casual and it's such a like cool practical little thing that Kurt Russell does here. And I love like little simple practical things. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's hard. It's sort of like Sigourney Weaver throwing the basketball over her head in
Yeah.
Alien Resurrection and it went in. Kurt Russell takes Billy Bob Thornton's gun and throws it over his shoulder, like across the room, and throws it to the bartender, and the bartender catches it. And I was like,
Yeah.
that was crazy. Like he
Yeah.
threw that thing like 30 feet
Yeah.
and like threw it over his shoulder without looking, and
Yeah.
it went through it right to the guy. I was like, that could have gone wrong so many times. Like you can
Yeah.
definitely tell that Kurt Russell's like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
I want to throw this gun over my shoulder to you without looking and have you
Yeah.
catch it. It's
The
like, yeah,
yeah,
I wonder how many takes that took him to get that,
I
but
know that would be the best thing about Kurt Russell in this movie is I never doubted how confident he was. every time, everything he did, he knew he was gonna be the best at it, right? Like his character, that's how his character is. But he fills that character so well. Every he's right every time, and he usually is, right? Like it's just kind of like he's never really not confident in what he's doing.
Well, I think that's kind of part of his arc though, is that
Yeah,
he is the most confident, unshakable, unflappable man, but then he does sort of get rattled
yeah,
when kind of like the midway point of the movie when his
yeah,
brother dies
exactly.
and and we'll get there,
Yeah,
but yeah, the Earp brothers show up into town. They take over the poker game in this bar that's called the Oriental, and
yeah, yeah, yes,
you know, but and they're told by the local lawman, the local marshal says the real law in town is the cowboys, that this
yeah,
cowboy gang is in town. But they sort of seem like in town, everyone sort of coexists. I did love this scene right after they leave the bar. Billy Bob Thornton comes out and he tries to confront him with a shotgun,
yeah,
and Doc Holliday comes over and stops him, I love how Billy Bob Thornton's just sort of standing there watching them talk, and then Doc Holliday
yeah,
looks at him and goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot you were here." And
yeah.
then and Kurt Russell just goes like, "Yeah, why don't you just set that shotgun down there?" And he's just
Yeah,
like, he like tries to hand it to him. He's like, "No, just put it down." And
I
he's
said
like,
just set it down. Yeah,
"Okay." He like sets it down. And he goes, and then he thanks him. He's like, "Thank you." And
yeah,
then,
and then he's gone. He's
yeah,
never in the movie again,
but I
which I
love
love
that.
that.
I love right here that the sheriff of the town comes
Yeah,
over and tries to talk to him, and kind of he makes a comment about how, like, here in Tombstone, we're actually pretty civilized. I don't know if you noticed, everyone dresses really nice, and we're growing. We're going to be as big as
yeah,
San Francisco in a few weeks. We're going to be a real
yeah,
city. And right then, these people pour out of a saloon and they're fighting, and one guy's like been shot in the throat, and another guy gets
yeah,
shot in the heart. And Doc Holliday looks at the sheriff and goes, "Very cosmopolitan."
yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
no, that's great.
yeah.
And I think Doc Holliday's introduction is before this, though.
It is.
We
We
forgot to say that, but
Right.
this is another great introduction.
Yeah.
That seems like maybe there was more there, but he's playing poker, and the guy's really mad because he's beat him so many times. Anyway, that the introduction, it doesn't do it justice to explain it, but it's just a great show off of like how confident he is, but how he likes to play with people.
Yeah, we've
He
got about 5 different scenes of Doc being very drunk playing poker and, like,
yeah,
probably cheating.
yeah,
And and
probably.
yeah, but it never is confirmed in the movie whether he's cheating or not.
No.
But yeah.
But it's a great introduction. We get into all
Mhm,
that, and then now we kind of get going in the movie, I guess. And there are two different like sheriffs. There's the county sheriff and then the town sheriff.
mhm.
County sheriff's a little bit more of like he's like a dapper type guy, and he doesn't really do anything. But the town sheriff is the one that seems to do it, and he's the one who later on we'll get into. But yeah,
Yeah. So then don't the actors show up then? They're yeah,
yes,
so all the actors show up, and Billy Zane gets out of a carriage, and
yeah,
Billy Zane's got a lovely long, long locks in this movie, and,
yes. Put a
um
cork in it, Zane.
yeah, Billy Zane was all over the '90s, man. He was just
Oh yeah,
everywhere in the
yeah,
'90s, and he's in this movie. Again, this cast is just huge, and our sort of love interest for the film, played
yeah,
by Dana Delaney, gets out of the carriage, and she's
yeah,
part of this acting troupe that's come to town. And I did like this scene. Obviously, I'm skipping forward here, but I liked the scene when they all went to the show. I kind of liked
yeah,
seeing the mechanics of like the old timey theater. I liked
yeah,
seeing the guy, the stagehand that was putting like the bottle of whiskey in front of the light to make
yeah,
the light look like fire on
yeah,
stage. I was like, ah,
yeah,
that's cool. I like seeing this kind of old timey
yeah,
stagecraft and stuff,
yeah. Well, I liked it too because of I'm sure it would have been even more fleshed out, but I do like how it was the introduction of the characters, right? Like, so Billy Zane is the first guy gets up and they shoot. He's juggling, and they shoot one of his pins, that he's
Mhm.
juggling, and he
Yeah.
runs off stage. And then you can tell like, oh man, this is gonna be bad. But Billy Zane comes up and they shoot at him, and he just kind of like brushes off some of the dust, and he keeps saying his Shakespeare,
He
and they're
does the
like
St.
all
Crispin's Day speech from Henry V. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and it just like I was just like this is really it's a really cool scene. Like
Well,
he
and to think that people there were these traveling troops that would go
yeah,
around
yeah.
and you know, try to stop in a town for a while and put on a touring show, but that you could like be dealing with drunk people with guns who might shoot at you if they don't like the performance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he it was just a cool little scene, and then the next one with the devil, they kind everybody was kind of entranced at that point. But then I liked just kind of the imagery of the girl is the devil. It didn't really play out how that was. And then this is the other thing. Like I liked Dana Delaney, but I it's always hard. It's hard for me to root for a relationship that is based like basically on cheating, right?
Oh,
Like
sure. It's like from the moment that Doc or from the moment that Wyatt and Dana Delaney's character first see each other, the music swells and the movie's
yeah,
telling you these two are going to fall in love.
yeah,
But immediately you're like, doesn't he have a wife?
yeah. He has a
Like
wife.
we just did like an introductory scene where him and his wife and his brother and all their wives were looking at themselves in
Yeah.
a mirror, like, oh, look at how happy we are. And I will say that in this edit, and maybe this is more fleshed out in another edit, but in this
Yeah.
edit, Wyatt Earp's wife gets a tough like hand. The movie just sort of treats her like an afterthought, and it just sort of
Yes.
she's just sort of there giving him like cross looks when she can tell that he's making gaga eyes at the
Yeah.
actress, but it never. And also, I did I miss something because I never saw Wyatt and his wife like break. Did his wife die? I
Good
like
point. You never
like
see you don't see it.
all of a
So
sudden she's just out of the movie
yeah,
and
she's on the train with his
okay.
brother.
Okay.
But they don't again, this I'm sure they would have fleshed that out way more.
Right.
And I get that like in real life, I guess she overdosed on, you know, drugs
Mm.
that were kind of prescribed at the time or whatever. And they didn't have a really good marriage. But like in this movie, like if you want us to kind of root for the other couple, you've got to make her kind of like bad.
Yeah, they put one scene into this edit where Wyatt comes home from work,
Yeah.
and his wife's, you know, drinking opium that she got
Yeah.
from like a doctor, and she's sort of high on the opium and she's a little bit belligerent.
Yeah.
And but her big like crime in the scene is that Wyatt's been out riding horses with the actress that he's in love with,
Yeah.
and the actress was talking about how she wants to live a life where she just has room service all the time.
Yeah.
And Wyatt says something to his wife who's on opium. He's like, what if we left this town and we just went and had room service? And she's like, what are you talking about? And that's like all just because she does that, he's like, ah, you don't get it. He's like, "Ah, I want a divorce. Like it's just it
It
doesn't
really
seem
is.
yeah, like it doesn't seem like enough. It just sort of seems like
No.
Wyatt's like bored of old wife and like wants new wife. And I think the movie could
Old
do a
wife and new
it
wife.
does feel like that. It's just like he's like,
Oh,
ah,
totally.
you're no fun.
Yeah.
Like new
I don't
wife. When I
like
was
you anymore. I'm gonna go get me a new wife.
like I was riding horses with new wife and she said she wants room service and that sounds more fun than this, you know, like and that's just like sort like
Yeah.
and I'm sure that maybe there's more in the screenplay that's again left on
Yeah.
the cutting room floor. But I
Yeah.
do feel like in this edit, yeah, I was like, oh, his wife gets shafted for sure. Like this
Yeah.
movie didn't
Yeah.
do enough to
Yeah.
sort of like
Yeah.
dissolve their relationship or show that
Yeah.
their relationship was never that strong to begin with.
Yeah.
It just
That
sort of she
yeah, that
just
they're
is
already fighting, like they
yeah,
already don't like each other, but
all the
yeah, that's
movie
not fair.
shows is that she's like looking at him with a disappointed look, but it's when he's very clearly pining after another woman, and I'm like, she's justified to look at you with that look. Like
Yeah, yeah. Like
she's
I
not doing
she's not a
yeah,
bad guy.
yeah,
You're the bad one. Like
yeah, yeah. And
yeah,
he
I
like
think
looks at her like, oh come on, don't look at me like that. I just want to go riding horses with her.
yeah.
And it's like
Yeah,
it's
it's like,
like,
dude, that's not good. Yeah.
yeah, like
The
sort out
I
this situation first, you know.
yeah, you could
Yeah.
almost like honestly cuz his wife in real life did overdose. So you could
I'd
just
say put that in the movie.
either
Like
put it in the movie or have it happen before the movie started so that she's already passed on and he can move on with his life, right? Like then
I think so. I think that, like, he
like
shows up to town with his brothers and their wives, but
yes.
his wife is recently deceased,
Yeah,
and
and
then we've
that's
just got,
and
you know
he wants something more. He misses his wife, right? Like it just be a little bit cleaner, but you know, that I'm sure there was way more that they were intending to do anyway, so.
there is something interesting, I will admit, about him trying to be honorable, you know, that,
Yeah. Yeah.
he tries to resist his attraction to the actress, you
Yeah.
know? Doc Holliday talks to him about it and is like, "What would you do
Yeah.
if that actress walked in here right now?" And then he goes, I would ignore
I
her."
yeah.
And then she does, and he does ignore her for the most part.
Yeah.
She, like, asks him to dance, and he declines, and then
Yeah.
Doc Holliday's like, "You are an oak, sir. I apologize."
Yeah.
You know, but then later when he goes riding horses with her, he's like, "Yeah, I guess I'm some oak." And,
Yeah.
like, and that it sort of
Yeah.
shows that he's got an internal struggle of,
Yeah.
obviously, I wanna be with this woman, but I feel
Yeah.
morally obliged to honor my relationship with my wife.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting to show this sort of moral conflict
Mhm.
in the character, but you've gotta just find more time to resolve whatever's going on with him and his wife so that he can
Yeah.
be, in some way, whether
Yeah.
that's her dying or whether that's them having a conversation where she consciously leaves and
Yeah.
we make it,
Yeah.
but like that scene when the gang breaks in and shoots at the wives, later on in the movie, I was like, did his wife get killed in that scene and I missed
No.
it? Because I was like, he was way sadder about his brother dying than his wife dying. Like he didn't care at all. I was like, if that happened
No.
and I missed it, like I can't
Yeah.
believe he wasn't like mourning that his,
Yeah. No, she didn't
but
die there, which
okay, yeah,
that was a
because
weird scene, but
but yeah, anyway, so, these actors are in town. He wants new wife. He is running the show. All after the show, the gang shows up at everyone's
yeah.
at the Oriental. The actors show up, the gang shows up, the Cowboys are all there, and Michael Bean and Doc Holliday have a pretty cool little moment. I
Yes.
I did
Yes.
like
I did love this.
I liked the parallel between their characters that
Yeah, I thought their dynamic was really, really interesting, which is it is a great payoff, but
yes.
I wish it was there more present throughout the movie. But yeah, this exchange that they have is awesome. I love it.
Yeah, if it seems like the movie's trying to say that of the bad guys, Powers Booth is the Wyatt Earp and
Yeah.
Michael Bean is the Doc Holliday.
Yes.
And and then of the good guys, it's Wyatt. Yeah, and they're sort of the mirror of each other.
Yes.
So there's like the lead guy and the right hand man.
Yep.
Um, I want to say this really quick uh, about Sam Elliott and Bill Paxton, who play Wyatt's brothers.
Yeah, yeah.
And I did like that Sam Elliott's character's name was Virgil because
Yeah.
that's my character in the Horizon movies is Virgil.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I was
yeah.
like, "Oh, Virgil." But I want to say this: as good as Kurt Russell looks in this movie, Sam Elliott's one of those actors who's just, I guess, always been old.
Yeah.
Like it's just like I was like, if you look
Yeah.
at Sam Elliott and Kurt Russell today, they look like they're the same age. They look
Oh,
like two
yeah.
old men. But
Yeah.
if you look at them in this movie, Sam Elliott looks like he's 25 years older than Kurt Russell.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
it looks like
Yeah.
it's crazy. Like Kurt Russell looks like he's like 35 in this movie,
Yeah.
and Sam Elliott looks like he's easily 55 or
I
60.
know. So he's 80
Yeah,
today. So that was what? He was 50?
he was 50, and Kurt
50?
Russell's what, 70?
Let's see.
So was Kurt Russell 40? And they're like 10 years apart?
74. So
70,
they're only 6 years apart, which yeah, he is eternally old.
yeah,
He's
he's just
like
a guy who's like, he's always been this guy.
yeah,
He's just like,
he's always been the
he's always
Western
just
guy.
always been this guy.
And
It's
and
just-
he's always old. He's like, is it Maggie Smith?
yeah, yeah.
Professor McGonagall.
Maggie
She's like
Smith has been old my whole life. Yep. She's,
I love that. Yeah. She's
mhm.
just eternally old. What like
She
hey,
was a
they
grandma in Hook in 1993,
yeah.
and she was the
And she
grandma. She
looked
was
exactly the same
yeah,
in
or 91,
2010
whatever.
when she was in all the Harry Potters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like, Betty White was old our whole
Yeah.
lives.
Yes.
Betty White
Yeah.
was on TV as an old woman in a show about old women when we were kids,
Yeah.
and then she just stayed an old woman our whole
Yeah.
lives. But yeah, maybe we'll see. Maybe it's like once you turn 50, it's just like, oh yeah, no. And I've said this before that like you're old for a lot longer than you're young.
Yeah,
You're
that's true.
if you're
Yeah.
lucky,
Yeah.
if you live a long full life.
Yeah.
But yeah, Sam Elliott, I was like, geez, like he looks at least 20 years older than than
He
everybody
does.
else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But let's see. Sam Elliott's great. I think going back to going back to that exchange between Michael
Holiday.
Biehn and yeah, and Doc
Yeah.
Holliday. I mean, they have a great like you can see that they're smart, right? They're
Mhm.
both smart. And then they start, they start showing off with Michael Biehn starts twirling his gun, and then Doc Holliday takes his drink and twirls his cup. And it was just a great, again, just like a great. I mean, it was really nice because I mean, you kind of see that it gets to Michael Biehn, so it really Doc Holliday
Mhm.
wins. And then like you can really tell that the hatred between those two people is really present out of something very, very silly. But it was
Right.
just a really great way to like illustrate their rivalry immediately since them not really knowing each other.
Well, but there's also this because I do think that Doc Holliday is the most fleshed out character in this entire movie,
Yeah.
and that's it's probably because they went when they were editing the film, they were just like, we can't cut anything Val does. He's so
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
But Doc Holliday says about Ringo, who is Michael Biehn's character,
Yeah.
he says, "This man reminds me of me. He reminds me of myself."
Yeah.
And then he goes, "And I don't like him because of that." And then
Yeah.
he goes, "Oh, now I really don't like him because he really reminds me of me. Now that I know that he's like book smart the same way that I am. He knows
Yeah.
Latin like I do, all
Yeah.
this stuff." But what that shows is that, and you can see this in Kilmer's performance, that Doc Holliday has sort of an aching sadness to him and like a sort of self-loathing sadness. Like even though he's dying of tuberculosis, he's terrible at taking care of himself.
Yeah.
He seems to have a very low regard for his own well-being. And so I think there's like an element of self-hatred to him. And when he says like, I don't like this guy because he reminds me of me. And
Yeah.
then later on in the film, and I'm jumping way ahead here, but later on, Kurt Russell is asking him a question about, like what does a man like Ringo want? What drives
Yeah.
him? And Holiday's telling him about a man like Ringo. He goes, a man like that has a big aching hole inside of him that can't be filled by anything. Doesn't matter how much violence he creates, doesn't matter how many people he kills,
Yeah.
he'll never be whole. But he's talking about himself. So
Yeah.
when he's saying that, when he's saying all that stuff about Ringo, the reason why he knows that is because it's him. And
Yeah.
that's why he's also
Yeah.
like, it has to be me who goes and confronts him,
Yeah.
because he has to sort of confront himself in a way
Yeah.
too, and put that to rest before he can die.
Yeah.
And
Well, and
yeah.
that really does show the glimpses of brilliance that are in the screenplay.
Mhm.
That because of that, I mean, whenever you have a great antagonist is usually the opposite, is usually the same as the protagonist, but they want opposite things,
Mhm.
right? And like, so that's why good antagonists are so interesting. And I mean, you hear it now, it's kind of a trope. You hear it all the time, like, oh, it's like I'm looking in a mirror, and they
Right.
try to they try to say like, oh, you and I are not so different, all
Yeah,
these
yeah.
things that they say. And it's nice in this one because they're blatant about it.
Mhm.
Val Kilmer is blatant about I don't like this man because he reminds me of me, right? Like they're not trying to hide from it. And
Mhm.
that's what makes it so good. And again, so brilliant because it just works so well. And also you see that they are very, very similar, but you also see how different they are because Doc is so lighthearted about everything, and then Michael Biehn is just so Ringo is just so like so serious about everything. But anyway, yeah, it's just a great interplay. That whole character, those two characters, it throughout the whole story makes it very fun to watch.
Yeah. But it's weird because, like, again, like the way that he shows up in this screenplay, it seems like for the first half
Yeah.
he's sort of begrudgingly a member of the Cowboys, and then all of a sudden at some point he switches and he's like a diehard ride or die cowboy, like, like, don't you mess with my brothers, like I'll come, like. And
Yeah.
I don't see when that happens, and I'm wondering if we're missing stuff here,
Yeah.
too. But maybe I don't know, maybe
I
it's
think you're right. Because
yeah,
that was the exact thought that I had as well. Like,
yeah.
oh, he's having a hard time being one of these cowboys. But yeah, then it seems like because this is pretty much after all this happens, pretty much at the midpoint of the movie, Powers Booth is sucking up some opium or whatever, and he gets on a bad trip or whatever, and he starts shooting just in random houses and in random, buildings and everything, and everybody gets freaked out, and then the sheriff, the town sheriff, comes out and is like, "Give me your guns," and Powers Booth like puts him down, but then he shoots him kind of with his pinky, and he kills the sheriff, and then Wyatt Earp comes in, Kurt Russell comes in and hits him, and then it's like, "You're going to stand trial." That seems to be when the shift is for Ringo.
Yeah, because what the fallout is Sam Elliott, who, they're all retired
Yeah.
lawmen. The
Yeah.
town has been asking them to step in and be
Yes.
lawmen, and they've been saying no the whole movie. They've been saying,
Yeah.
"No, we're retired. We don't do that anymore." But Sam Elliott kind of, steps in and goes, "You know what? There's decent people here in this town who are being terrorized by this gang,
Yeah.
and they need a decent lawman." So he steps in to be the new marshal in place of Bill White, or Fred White,
Yeah.
who was
Yeah.
killed by Powers Booth's character, and he makes this new rule that says you can't bring your guns into town. And when you're in town, you've got to surrender your guns. And
Yeah.
people obviously don't like that in a Wild West town, but he's
Uh-huh.
like, I'm not saying you can't have guns. I'm saying when you're in town, because that in town is where everybody gets drunk, where everybody gets kind of
Yeah.
fired up at the bars. But this is what really sets the gang off is they don't
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that there's like a new law in town that's challenging their authority. And so the gang gets really riled up about it. And
Mhm.
it really kind of gets the match really gets lit with Steve Lang's character,
Yeah.
where I can't remember what he does that makes the Earp
Well,
brothers.
yeah, he's playing poker,
Oh, that's
and
right.
he gets mad at Doc Holliday because he says, like, "You won 12
Yeah, that's right.
hands in a row," and they're just like they tell him to just calm down and sober up, and he doesn't, and they put him in jail for the night, right? That's what happens,
Yeah,
right?
because I think he comes back with guns to try to do something about it, and they wind up,
Yeah.
Kurt Russell winds up hitting him over the head with a gun and knocking him out and taking him to
Yeah.
the drunk tank, which is another just like great Wyatt Earp moment of like the
Yeah.
guy's got a gun and he just takes it out of his hand and just hits him over the head with it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then when the guy when he wakes up and they let him out of the drunk tank, he's like, "We're coming for you." And then so these different townspeople show up and they're like, "Hey, word on the street is that the Cowboys are not having it, that they're coming for you, the Earp brothers." And this is where we have the shootout at the OK Corral,
Yes.
which is
Yeah.
like a really great icon. I love the way that this is shot, that it's just like
Yeah.
it's the three Earp brothers and Val Kilmer, and they're strutting. They're just like
Yeah.
strutting through the street. And for some reason,
It's a standoff.
there's a building on fire, and we didn't see who, but it's great. It's just like they're
Yeah.
walking.
They look back and acknowledge it, and I was like, "Why is that building on fire?"
It's like, is anyone gonna do anything about that?
There's one guy who, like, throws water at it. I'm like, "That water did literally nothing. I don't even
Yeah,
think it got on the fire." But yeah, it is a
yeah,
cool way. They're walking up, and then they sit there, and you have these long shots of everybody just staring, which
yeah.
again, a very classic Western, kind of
Hmm.
the standoff. And Stephen Lang he's so funny because he was the one who was so mad
Yeah.
and was like, "We're gonna come after you guys." And then he's there, and he's like, "Oh, oh," he's like super scared,
Yeah.
and he's the one. So you have these long standoffs. They're all just staring at each other, and then uh, Doc Holliday winks at Thomas Hayden Church, who they kind of have like
Mhm.
a little rivalry.
Mhm.
And Thomas Hayden Church fires first, but then that's when the gunfight starts happening, and it's really quick, but it's all very effective, and it's really I was able to track everything that was going on. Like it wasn't too jarring. It was all like shot really well so that you could see who was shooting who and kind of what was happening. And Stephen Lang is like, "I don't have a gun. Don't shoot me. I don't have a gun." And he like he like runs up to him, and then Kurt Russell pushes him aside. What does he say? He's like, "Find a gun or get out of here," or
Yeah.
whatever he says. And so then Stephen Lang goes in and like steals the sheriff's gun and starts shooting from inside the
Yeah.
photo booth or whatever it is. And
Yeah, and Doc's shooting at him, and
yeah,
somehow can't hit him. But
no,
yeah, well, in the end, it's like, I think Sam Elliott takes a slug to the leg,
yeah,
and Bill Paxton gets shot in the arm. But
yeah,
earlier there was a scene where while the
yeah,
brothers were saying we want to go, and Bill Paxton, who's the youngest brother, is saying I want to
yeah,
go. Wyatt Earp tries to tell him, "Trust me, you don't want that." He goes,
yeah,
"I've been there," and he goes, "In the few times that I've been in shootouts, it's you don't want to live with it." So they do this whole shootout, and then later you see Bill Paxton. He's talking with his brother, and he's like, "You were right. Like it was
yeah,
really, it's hard. It, you know, I, Westerns are built on the suspense of the
yeah,
shootout, building up the suspense, and then and it's a quick release. And
yeah,
I think this movie has some good sequences where it does it pretty well, but I
mhm,
also I felt like it could have been like, I feel like it can be earned more by the script. Again, maybe like I said, I like that this movie tries to stick with the
Yeah.
order that events happened in, but it also just sort of makes it feel like they're checking off things on a where they're just like,
Yeah.
then this happened, then this happened. And cinematically, it feels like we could build up to some of these moments more,
Yeah.
which makes like the standoff between Doc Holliday and Ringo at the end feel more, it feels like it's been building for
Yeah.
longer,
Yeah.
and so it feels like it's maybe a little more earned and a little more exciting cinematically, but
Yeah.
some of these it just sorta, like, feels like we're doing a standoff because that's what you're supposed to do in these movies, and
Yeah.
I feel like I feel like there's no one better at this in at least modern cinema than Quentin Tarantino at,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
at
Yeah.
doing the long build up where you can feel it, you can feel that tension underneath the
Yeah.
scene, and, necessarily with the way that they are fighting, it has to be over quick because once people start shooting, it's just like, well, you're standing across from each other, someone's gonna get shot, and it's gonna happen fast. And
Yeah.
I like that about Tarantino's standoffs where it'll just be this like fast, like 30-second burst of violence.
Yeah.
And that's definitely how this goes down, but it just
Yeah.
feels a little like maybe staged is the word, or, you
Yeah.
know.
I mean, I think the shootout this shootout works well. At least I thought. But then, yeah, the rest of them are kind. It loses a lot of momentum or build up because there's nothing really that is building up, or there's not a showdown between two characters that's really built up. And I think you're totally right when Doc Holliday and Ringo have their showdown. We've been expecting that the whole movie, and
Mhm.
so to finally have it, it makes it so much more of a payoff.
Yeah.
But when you're setting up a showdown with nobody, there's not much of a payoff. And that is kind of after this shootout, that's kind of what happens because pretty much after this, they realize like, oh, things are gonna get worse. And then their brother, so Virgil gets shot in the arm and can't use his arm anymore. And then
The
his
wives
brother,
get shot at,
yeah,
and so there's, like, kind of this one night where, like,
yeah,
the gang kinda goes wild on the Earp family in retaliation for the OK
yeah,
Corral shootings, and they shoot Virgil, that he loses his arm, basically. They
yeah,
shoot at the wives, and they shoot Bill Paxton, and he
yeah,
winds up dying, and
yeah,
this sort of it basically sets off, uh this sort of kicks us into the final act of the
yeah,
film where
yeah,
basically Wyatt goes on a revenge spree
yeah,
with Doc and a few guys who have
yeah.
abandoned the cowboy gang.
Yeah, Michael
And
Rooker comes in,
mhm,
which Michael Rooker was in Horizon, right? And did you
yeah.
get to work with him?
Yeah, Rooker and I have, yeah, we worked together a lot,
Nice.
yeah. So,
He's a very interesting. I feel like he was underutilized in this movie, probably
yeah,
because he was more of a younger actor.
mhm.
But he's always an interesting he's a very interesting actor because
I
he
I
has a
forgot he was
big
there, and then
presence.
all of a
Yeah.
sudden when he showed up, I was like, "Oh, hey, Rooker." I was like,
Yeah,
"Yeah,
yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah." I
Yeah,
mean, that guy is he's a great actor, and he's
that's
someone
good.
who he does things that I don't understand how he does them. Like,
Yeah.
he has a simplicity to him in,
Mhm.
like, really really big swing character roles that's
Yeah.
so he's just so watchable.
Yeah.
Um,
I think
yeah,
that's why it was so weird to see him in this role because
yeah,
he's just I don't know how many movies he did before this, but I don't think he was what he is now. Well, he obviously isn't what he is now, but
yeah,
he was just so like straightforward. I was hoping he would be a little bit more Rooker, but he probably hadn't gotten to that point. But
yeah.
he turns and so it's him and then a couple of the two drunks at the beginning who are shooting, and then yeah, Doc, and they put their wives, and then they put Virgil on the train, and everybody thinks they're or Stephen Lang and then one of the other guys are like expecting to kill Wyatt Earp, but Wyatt Earp knew he was there, and they're like, "Where's Wyatt?" And he's like, "I'm right here," and he's behind him, and he shoots one guy, and then Stephen Lang again is like,
Stephen
"Don't
Lang
shoot me!
keep
Don't shoot
yeah,
me!"
Stephen Lang just keeps getting away. There was a whole movie, I kept being like, "Shoot this guy!"
I
Like,
know. I was like, "Why are you shooting him?" Like,
yeah,
which I guess that happened in real life, but it was almost like comic
yeah,
relief, right? Like he just like
he
shows up
just
ready for a
keeps
fight,
getting
and he's like,
away.
"I don't know. Here's
Yeah,
my gun." Like,
yeah, this is the I'd say this is the act of the film that feels the most kind of like there's the most on the cutting room floor. Like it feels like the
Probably.
third act of
Yeah.
this movie, like we do a lot of like montage of just them
Oh,
going
yeah.
around just shooting people, and it feels like there were probably a lot of full action
Yeah.
sequences that were shot that were just sort of cut together, and it's like basically what this is like a revenge rampage where
Yeah. Yeah,
Wyatt and these
exactly.
guys are going around sort of taking out the gang one by one. We slow down a couple times for a few different moments. One of the
Yeah.
moments we slow down for is this moment at like the riverbed
Yep.
where Wyatt and the gang get pinned down and they're sort of being I, I don't know what do you think about this moment because I know it's a real story from
Yes.
like lore,
Yeah.
but the execution of it had me kind of going like, "This is a little silly to me."
Yeah. I
Even though I'm
think
like, maybe it's a real thing that happened in real life. I don't know, but
yeah, that is supposedly the story
yeah.
that Wyatt Earp said no, and then he went. I agree though the execution. I think where it got really silly is when they had him go in slow motion. He's like no, and
Yeah.
the shotgun. I was like, I don't think you needed that. I think one or two no's is good enough, and then
Yeah.
he just goes up and he could shoot him. But
Yeah, I think the execution wise, it should have gone faster. I think
yeah,
what made it
yeah,
silly for me is that the whole thing sort of unfolded, not even just the slow-mo parts, but even the
yeah,
regular mo parts felt like slow motion. It
yeah,
felt like Kurt Russell was like walking through molasses in the river and
yeah,
everyone was shooting at him and I was like, "How is nobody hitting him?" And it
yeah,
feels like just cinematically, if he had gone, "No," and gotten up and ran into the river and just went boom, 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 boom,
yeah,
boom,
yeah,
boom, boom, and
yeah,
just taken out like 12 guys in a row, and then the
yeah,
rest of the gang helps, and just miraculously when all the dust settles, he's just
yeah,
not hit,
yeah,
and that makes it but it's the fact that, like, he's moving so slow and, like, shooting at, like, one guy at a time, and he's got
yeah,
bullets coming at him from all angles that you're like, "Well, this just and I know that that's, like, that's the magic of the
yeah,
moment,
yeah,
but then it also I feel like we get a kind of anticlimactic showdown with Powers Booth here. Like,
yeah.
Powers Booth gets into the water with him, and then when he shot him, I was like, "Oh. Oh, okay." I was like,
He's dead.
like, there it is. And I was like, "This movie's got, like, 30 minutes left in it."
Yeah,
Okay. I thought Powers Booth was, like, the guy. Um,
yeah,
and and he just sort of he shoots him with a shotgun, and that's kind of it. And, and I wasn't even clear. I was like, "Is he dead?" Because he shot him in the side, and he, like, fell into
yeah,
the water, and I was just like, "Yeah, I guess so. I guess that's
yeah,
it," for Powers Booth's character. And for
yeah,
such a they make such a big deal of that character the whole movie. They feel like they're building him up so much that I
yeah,
thought there would be something else to him. And again, I that's me being trained to expect
yeah,
a certain cinematic structure, and this movie's just following the bullet points of, like, what happened,
yeah, and
you know?
I think you're totally right. I think, in a more cinematic movie, you'd have I mean, because the 2 mirrors of each other kill each other, right? So
Right.
Wyatt Earp kills, Powers Booth character, and then Doc Holliday kills Ringo. But you'd wanna have those happen either at the same time or both at the climax, but
Yeah,
this is still not really the climax. So it's
right.
kind of weird, like, okay, with the showdown between the 2 main people ends up not even being the climax of the
Which I
movie.
which I don't necessarily hate, like, that's
Yeah, I
another
don't
thing that
either.
I kinda went, "Oh, I didn't expect that to happen yet,"
Yeah,
but I was like, "Oh, cool, I like that the movie can surprise me," and the
yeah,
way that it's surprising me is by just being more like real life than
yeah,
like a movie, and that's
yeah.
kind of cool.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
is, and it did, it did work, like, for that in
yeah.
that way, but, yeah, that I mean, Powers Booth gets killed, and then, they basically end up with Charlton Heston.
Yeah, the gang Doc's really sick.
Yeah,
Doc
yeah,
collapses, and so they gotta take Doc somewhere, and they find this ranch house, and out comes Charlton Heston
yeah,
as Henry Hooker,
yeah,
and I was like, "My goodness, Charlton Heston," like, just as
yeah,
if the cast wasn't stacked enough,
yeah,
and they leave Doc Holliday with Charlton Heston, but they get a message, from the Cowboys,
yeah,
from Ringo, who has taken over as the new leader of the Cowboys. And we get like a montage of the new Cowboys going around doing all kinds of mayhem too. That
yeah,
they're on a rampage, they're doing their own revenge, get back at you.
yeah,
But uh we get a message from the Cowboys, and they've gotten Michael Rooker,
yeah,
who plays McMasters, and they've dragged him behind a horse
yeah,
to leave for the boys and say, Ringo wants to do a final showdown with Wyatt at this
Yeah.
location. So
Yeah.
be there, be square. But also, this was a moment where like this scene was funny too because one of the guys goes, "Oh, they got McMaster's," and I
Yeah.
was like, didn't you guys notice that he was missing? Like the five of you are
Yeah.
together on the road, and you've all stopped at this cabin. No one noticed, like, hey, has anybody seen McMaster's? Because the way
Well,
that it's cut, I'm sure that there's probably a scene where like
yeah.
Michael Rooker's character like goes off to get
Yeah.
supplies or something,
Yeah.
and then it was, but like the five of them are like at this ranch, and then all of a sudden they're just dragging Michael Rooker's
Yeah.
character behind a horse, and it's like, when did that happen?
I know. Well, it
You know,
took me a while too. I was like, wait, which character is that?
I had
Like,
to rewind it to be
I
like,
did too.
I had to be like, "Who's missing?" And then I was like, "Oh, Michael Rooker's gone."
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
was like, oh,
so
okay, I guess, yeah, I guess that's him. So yeah,
but I
it was
thought,
jarring.
wouldn't they have noticed that he was, because they were like, "Oh, no,
Yeah.
they got him." And I was like, "When did they get him? You guys are
Yeah.
all together." And
Yeah.
again, this is all stuff, this is why I say the third act really is where you start to feel that, like,
Hmm.
pieces are missing. Because again, I start to be like, I didn't really see the dissolution of Wyatt and his wife's
Yeah.
marriage, but that
Yeah.
seems to have completely left the story. That's just
Yeah.
gone. Somewhere in here, they sort of shoehorn in a moment for the actors to leave town and for Wyatt to sort of miss his chance to they get like, like they meet back up again. I think the actors show up at this ranch or something that they're at, and they have a quick little moment together, but it all feels like there's just pieces,
Yeah.
like we're sort of just trying to get to the end of the movie. But yeah, Wyatt's got this showdown scheduled with
Yeah.
Ringo, and he consults Doc Holliday about it. We have the scene we already talked about where Doc kind of tells him about, and a great scene. But then I do like this, that at the showdown, um, where Ringo's waiting, a guy shows up, and in the distance you can't really see who it is, and he's like, "Oh wow, I didn't think you were going to show." But then when he steps into kind of
Yeah.
into range to be able to see him and lifts his hat, it's Doc,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we as the audience thought Doc was on his deathbed, so we
Yeah.
didn't expect him to be there. But they do have a nice, and I wonder if you had this experience watching the movie, because initially, the first time Doc says, "I'm your Huckleberry,"
Yeah.
is we don't even see him say it. Like, we don't even the shot is not on his face when
Yeah.
those words are uttered, and I thought, "Is that it?" Because it's one of the most famous lines from the
Yeah.
movie. It's the line that everyone quotes. It's the line that you said at the top of the show.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I rewinded it because I was like, "Is that it?" And I
Yeah.
watched it again, and I was like, "How weird that in the
Yeah.
cultural zeitgeist, that's the
Yeah.
line from this movie." And it's, you don't even see, Val Kilmer say it,
Yeah.
and he says it he kind of throws it away. The guy goes like, "Well, one of you fellers needs to, owes me. One of you needs to do a shootout with me."
Yeah.
And from the porch, Doc Holliday's like, "I'm your Huckleberry." And he just
Yeah.
sort of says
Yeah.
it like that, but you don't even see him. Like, you
No.
hear it off screen.
Yeah.
And I thought, "Is that it?" But then he says it again at the
Yeah.
beginning of this shootout. He
Well,
steps into view and goes, "I'm your Huckleberry." And it's like,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, and
Mhm.
it's so great because it's a great reveal. And again, the lighting and everything looks really, really good because it's his face kind of illuminates when he lifts his head up, right? And it's like, oh, it's a great reveal. And then yeah, I'm your Huckleberry.
Mhm.
And it's great. I didn't, I didn't I have seen this movie before, so I kind of knew it was I was coming. So I didn't really have that same experience. But yeah, that is kind of the I do find it interesting because the Huckle like I saw one thing that said, according to certain accounts, they think he said bearer, which I guess
Mm.
is like another term for pallbearer.
Mm.
So instead of Huckleberry, it's Hucklebearer, meaning I'm gonna kill you and then I'll walk you to your grave type thing. Um, but what is the other? If he says I'm your Huckleberry, what does that even mean?
I don't know.
But it is
Uh,
cool.
I don't know what that means. I was like, I literally was just like, "Does that mean, like, he's your friend that'll do shenanigans with you? Like, you're Tom Sawyer
Yeah.
and I'm Huck?" I don't know what that
Or
means.
yeah, does it like
If
just
you
make
wanna
him
dance,
uncomfortable? Like, yeah, yeah,
you wanna play a game, I'll play with you. I'll be
yeah.
Huck, I'll be Huck. I don't know. But, is that people don't know what the screenplay says? Like, does it are we
No,
not
no, in the real account, I guess Doc Holliday did actually say this, like,
okay.
I'll be your Huckleberry."
Mhm.
But there are differing accounts or a couple accounts that think he said Hucklebearer. I don't know. I didn't look into it too much, so if anybody knows, let us know. But I thought that actually made more sense. But the Huckleberries is kind of it is like this almost
Isn't that
mysterious
so
thing though that they carry.
interesting that this movie's so much about, like, the mythos, like, the
Yeah.
legend of the
Yeah.
Old West and the legend of these guys, and people are like, "We don't actually even know what he said."
Yeah.
It's just like
Yeah.
so it's just like, so you just got Val Kilmer saying this line that people quote endlessly, and everyone's like,
Yeah.
"I don't know what it means." It's just
Yeah.
like,
Yep.
"Don't even know what he's saying."
Yeah.
It's like, just sounds cool. It's
Yeah. And it does.
you
That's the
know?
thing. Like it really does. He makes if you had somebody else saying it, it could
Yeah.
just be like, "What was that guy saying?" But because the way he says it, the fact that it's Val Kilmer, it works. It works
Well, I
great.
like I like the repetition of "say when" too, because he says that in the
Yes.
street, but
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
first confrontation. I like when he has the gun behind his
On his
back and he kinda
back.
says it more
Yeah.
and he's like, "Say when. Say"
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
like that, and then in the woods, he kind of really quietly looks at him and goes, "Say when,"
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and
And then
that's real
they
yeah.
yeah, they have the shootout and it's a great I mean, they kind of like, walk around each other
Mhm.
and they have this buildup and then it just happens so quickly. But Doc Holliday gets him pretty much at the top of the head.
Yeah,
And then like Ringo's like, and then he falls over and then Wyatt actually does show up. Like he was
yeah,
going to go, which
yeah,
I thought was really good too. It's a weird it's definitely a play on your expectations
yeah,
because the climax is not with Wyatt Earp.
yeah.
Which I feel like it worked. I liked it. I like when you kind of subvert expectations, and this one worked really well. Then they have their kind of exchange, and Doc's like, I wasn't as sick as I was letting on. So
Yeah. Well, and like I said, in this cut of the movie, the storyline that is the most intact is the friendship between these two
yeah,
guys because it's the only one that really survives through the third act. All of the
yeah,
other storylines kind of fray and fall off
yep,
by the third act of this film, but that's the storyline that emerges as kind of the storyline is sort of the unfulfilled spirit of these two
yeah,
men. That the thing that they have in common is Wyatt has sort of spent his life wandering from town to town, not sure of what it is he's looking for or what he wants. And Doc has sort of also like philandered about and just
hmm
gambled and he doesn't feel like he feels like one of the only things that he's done that's of any worth is maybe supported his friend Wyatt Earp and
right,
in his pursuits. And I love that scene too where the guys go like, "Why do you
yeah,
do this? Like you're about
yeah,
to die." And he goes, "Wyatt Earp is my friend." And the guy goes, "Well, shoot, I got lots of friends." And
yeah,
he goes, "Well, I don't."
yeah,
And
yeah,
and it's just sort of like I have very few friends
yeah,
and Wyatt Earp's one of them.
yeah.
And
And
I love
even I mean, even the other Earp brothers don't like Doc.
yeah,
Like Wyatt likes Doc.
yeah.
And that it really yeah, that line, "I don't have many friends," it says a lot without saying a lot.
Yeah, and I love their last scene together. It's lovely.
Yeah.
It's like
It is,
like
yeah.
it basically, the emotional sort of conclusion of the storyline between these two men is that Doc kind of says, "Hey, if you ever cared about me, if you ever
Yeah.
had any sort of feeling for me, leave me and go live your life.
Yeah.
Uh go get that woman that you go
Yeah.
find her and go live a life, don't
Go get new wife.
go get new wife." And so, yeah, Wyatt leaves Doc to die
Yeah.
in a hospital bed, and he goes and gets a new wife, and that's sort of the end of the movie is
Yeah.
he goes and
They have a weird dance in the snow and
uh-huh. I was like,
it's
"Boy,
a
you're
weird
taking a
ending.
big gamble that she hadn't moved on by the time you showed
Yeah.
up." Like, he just
Yeah.
he's like, "Hey, remember me, that guy that you, like, rode horses with one day in
Yeah.
Tombstone?" He's like, "I'm here to marry you." And she's just like, "'Kay."
Okay.
But
Yeah.
she's like, she's down.
Yep.
She's been waiting, luckily, and that's,
Yeah.
maybe the most,
Yeah.
cinematically, correct thing in this final act.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like but by the time we got there, that's when I was going, "Did we ever see his marriage to his other wife end?" And I was like,
No.
I don't think we did." But I was like,
Well, the
"Okay, alright,"
the funny thing is, like, they're dancing, and then the narrator comes back on, and he's like, "Wyatt Earp's wife died of an overdose." And I was like I was like, "What?
Yeah,
Why'd you do that after?" Like, what
yeah.
it was such a weird way to,
Put
like,
that in the movie.
"Don't worry, his wife was dead at this point," so
Wyatt
it
Earp's
was weird.
boring wife was dead. Don't worry. She died from too much opium. But he
Yeah.
was married to his fun wife for 50 years.
Yep.
You know, uh
New wife was much better.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that's Tombstone.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a fun movie. a little bit messy, but also again
Yeah.
they're trying to follow a real life account of events in
Yeah.
to some degree or another.
Yeah.
I like how many familiar faces are here. I like a lot of the work that's being done. Kurt
Yeah.
Russell's very hot,
Yeah.
and Val Kilmer
He's
is
amazing.
fantastic. He's great.
Yeah, and I watched this short on Kurt Russell, and he was talking about Tombstone, and because a few months later, Wyatt Earp came out, which had Kevin Costner in it.
Hmm.
And so it was like those, those time when two movies that are pretty much the same
Yeah.
come out. And he was saying, like, he said Wyatt Earp is a great movie. These are two great movies, he said, but I think he's like, obviously Tombstone has lived up, has kind of had a longer life. And he said something that I thought was really interesting. He said because there is no other Western that people quote more than Tombstone. And I was
Yeah.
like, that's true. There's so many great one-liners and like things that just kind of stick with you, that it's a very quotable movie.
If you ask 50 men in, in Texas what their top 10 favorite movies are, this is going to be on like 45 of their
Yeah,
lists,
probably.
of their top 10. There's a certain kind of man
Yeah,
that like this is there are men who think that this movie is as close to perfect as movies get. I'm
yeah.
not one of them, but I did
No.
enjoy the movie, and I
Yeah,
was like, there's a certain kind of guy who this is like movie heaven for them.
yeah.
Is yeah.
Uh-huh.
Mm,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Well,
So
should we do scores?
let's do scores. If this is your first time watching the Wonder podcast, we give scores. We grade movies out of 10, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst. We give a technical rating for how well the movie was constructed at a technical level, just the craft of the filmmaking on display. We give a rating for the ending. How well did they stick the landing with the movie? How well did they end things? We give a rating for rewatchability. How likely would you be to return and do repeat viewings of this film? We do a score for cultural significance and cultural impact, and we do a score for our just subjective feelings about the movie. Kramer, what is your technical rating for Tombstone?
I'm still wondering about this because
Hmm.
I'm so torn, because what they did well, they did really, really
Yeah.
well. Like the acting is amazing. And the acting from everybody is pretty much amazing.
And how
Like,
about like we didn't even talk about like production design and costume design.
yeah.
Like there's
Yeah.
some really great stuff going on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like it's amazingly well made in the in certain aspects of this technical rating, right? But then you get like there's just some weird goofy stuff that like you can tell this movie was chopped. There's a review that says like this looks like a 3-hour rough cut that was cut down to a 2-hour rough cut. And it's like,
Hmm.
yeah, that kind of, yeah, I could see that.
And again, I would not be surprised if a 2 hour and 45 minute long or 3 hour long cut of this movie would actually flow better.
It
Would
might.
I, you know,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
it probably would. So it's like I admire so much of the some of the technical side of things. So I'm giving it a 7, but that's because the all the things that they did well, they did so well, as I had mentioned before.
That's exactly where I'm at. Is I'm docking points for, even though I don't necessarily dislike the messiness. I like that the messiness
Yeah.
feels more like real life. I like that the messiness catches me off guard because it's not following the traditional beats of like what
Yeah.
a screenplay should follow. I like that. What I don't necessarily like is when I can feel that stuff is missing that
Yes.
would be helpful to know, when there are pieces missing or when there's things that feel like they come out of nowhere because there's other pieces missing elsewhere. And
Yeah.
but like the stuff that's in there that makes it into the cut, a lot of it really works. And on a
Yeah.
technical level, the execution, the cinematography, the acting, the production design, the costume design, everything's really taking me into the world of the film and
Yeah.
making it so that even the stuff that's a little bit messy, I'm still like, yeah, but I'm having fun.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying this ride.
Yeah.
So 7 from me.
Yeah, that's
And how about the ending? How do you feel about the ending of this film?
the ending again is kind of like I gave it a 6.5
Hmm.
because I mean that standoff between Doc and Ringo is so well earned. But like right after that, it's like a subversion of expectation, but then right after that, they go on another murder spree. Like, oh, good
Right.
job. And then it's like, woohoo, woo! They can like murder a bunch more people. And I was
Yeah,
like,
that
this is
montage was
so
wild.
weird. Like,
Yeah.
what? It was such a weird way to transition. And
And I
then
don't
so
think we needed that
no,
montage. Yeah.
I don't think so either. Like, so it's such a weird third act, but it's also there's so much good in it. So I couldn't get it to a 7. I think so. I gave it 6.5.
Yeah, I gave it a 6 because it is the whole 3rd act at being
Yeah.
the kind of cumulative ending for me is like the messiest act, and then
Yeah.
when it finally does reach its like real true ending of him going and getting the girl, I
Yeah.
was just sort of like, I don't know if
Yeah.
I don't know if I really care about this relationship, and I don't, and it was just sort of like I was like, okay, sure, like the
Yeah.
end, sure, why not? And that was,
Yeah.
but it wasn't like an ending that I went, yes, I feel
Yeah.
very satisfied, and I feel it was sort of like, sure, why not? Good enough, you know?
Yeah.
So I gave it a
Yeah.
6.
Yeah.
How about rewatchability?
I gave it a 7.5, and I gave it that because it does there are times when it drags a little bit.
Mhm.
But it's so fun to watch parts of this movie, the
Yeah.
parts that you like and the performances. It's like a fun movie to watch and you're going to have a good time. So, what did you score it at?
I gave it a 6.5. I could see myself coming back to this film. Just I get why that kind of guy who this is on their top 10 or maybe it's their favorite film of all time.
Mhm.
Like men who are like enthusiasts about the old west. I get why this movie would be
Yeah,
high
yeah,
on their, because there's just so much for them to like sink their teeth into about
yeah.
like, oh, did you know in real life this guy actually, did you know that, like,
Mhm.
and there's so much. The reason why there's such a huge cast is because there are, in real life there's just all these characters that the movie
Yeah,
wants to include, and I like all that, and I can see how on repeat viewings you could look for little nuggets, little
yeah,
Easter eggs of like,
yeah,
ooh, that look from Thomas Hayden Church's character right there, and that,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
already established, things like that. So I could see coming back to it, but I also don't know how likely I will be to come back to it. So 6.5
yeah,
for me.
yeah.
Cultural significance for you.
I did an 8 because this has even though um it what like the critics are kind of all talking about what we've been saying. Like
Mhm.
it wasn't good, but it's a really fun movie to watch. So they're all kind of that way. But it seems to have had an influence. I mean, especially Val Kilmer and Kurt Russell. Like these are really standout performances that people go back to all the time,
Yeah.
and it is so quotable. And it's still, it's still quotable even today. So I think it's actually had a pretty big cultural impact for what it was.
I put it at an 8 as well. I mean, here we are, 32 years later,
Yeah.
and it is, of my lifetime, one of the westerns that continues to, and I know that even in 1993, this was already in homage territory, where
Yeah.
we
Oh
were
yeah.
already
Yeah.
doing an homage to like a bygone era of filmmaking with this
Mhm.
movie.
Yeah,
But it feels like this movie has lasted through 3 decades and can and maintained relevancy and
yeah,
maintained quotability and maintained sort of a certain mythic quality to it. So
yeah,
it does seem, at least in the zeitgeist of a certain kind of viewer, to be
yeah.
very culturally significant. And your subjective score for this film?
My subjective score I gave a 7.5. I don't think I can give it an 8 because of all the problems. It's kind of like the theme of the whole thing. There's so much good. It's really good at what it's good at, and then there's some weird stuff. So I gave it a 7.5. What about you?
Subjectively, weirdly enough, I'm just not a huge Western fan.
Yeah, yeah.
I like certain aspects of Western films, and then there's other aspects of like, I don't romanticize the Old West that some people, in the
Yeah.
way that some people
Yeah.
do, and that's why I like Tarantino's
Yeah.
take on it, because I feel like it's more critical in a way that appeals to my sensibilities more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so my subjective score is 6.5, just because I think I had a really good time with this movie, but when it
Yeah.
comes to the kinds of movies that I gravitate towards more
Yeah. Yeah.
naturally, this isn't one of them, but it's a good version of this kind of movie, uh,
Yeah.
and enjoyable, and yeah, so I enjoyed it.
Nice.
What do you guys think about Tombstone? What's your favorite Val Kilmer performance? Let us know all of those things in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. As somebody said recently in one of our comment sections, someone was like, "This show's still criminally underrated," and I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I don't
Yeah,
know,
come on.
come on, help us out here. Tell your friends.
Yes.
Spread the news.
And that was a very nice comment. That
That
was a
was.
great comment. I appreciated that, Brent.
Yeah, but we'll see you on the next one.
Yep. We're going to go have some Hertz donuts.
Mhm.
Bye-bye.